knows, but I'd like to define it. Retail fundraising is the practice. Okay, practice is again an important word, kind of comes back at the end, of raising small amounts of money, anywhere from 1 rupee to 1 lakh rupee, from a large number of donors on a regular basis. So as you can see, certain phrases have been emphasized: small amounts of money, large number of donors, and regular. Regular is what makes it a practice, right? So let's also understand what it is not, right? Sometimes understanding what it is not helps us better understand what it is. It is not about generating funds from institutions, corporate HNIs, right? It is large number of individual donors that we are looking to raise money from. So it is not generating funds from those who are giving large amounts of money, which are typically institutions, corporates, and HNIs. It's not about raising money from retail stores. You know, somebody actually had this misconception, and I'm glad they were brave enough to speak about it, and I could correct them very upfront. But so I think it's good to just lay it. It's not about raising money from retail stores. It is not about fundraising from few people, right? Even if they are giving you small amounts of money, even if you are doing regularly, doing it with few amounts of people is just not worth your while. You must have a reasonable number of people, and I will define what this reasonable number of people is as we go ahead. Running campaigns on a one-off basis. It is not about running campaigns on a one-off basis, right? It is about continuous, regular practice. Now, with that in mind, I have a poll for all of y'all. And I'm going to launch this poll. Yeah, okay. So I think you can see a poll. It has 2 questions. Would love for all of y'all to answer these 2 questions. One is, what is the share of retail fundraising in your overall donations? That's one response only. And the second question is, what is the reason that you do not do retail fundraising actively? You can choose more than one option in this one. So if you can just answer these 2 questions, if all of y'all can just answer these 2 questions, that would be great. And in the meanwhile, I'll just go back and see if there were any questions in the chat box that did not get answered. There were, okay.
आपण जो व्यक्ति को कॉल करूछंती से तार उत्तर.
Okay, so if everyone can answer these 2 questions, and we'll then move ahead. Okay, we are about 50 of us out here. I have only 25 responses so far. So if we can be quick about this, we can move a little faster through the rest of the process. So I'm just going to give you another 10 seconds more, and we'll close this poll. You have 2 questions. What is the share of retail fundraising? And what is the reason that you do not do retail fundraising actively? If you don't, if you do, then you probably are not going to answer this. But if you don't. Okay, so I'm going to end this poll now and share the results with you. And let's just look through the results a bit and understand, where this group broadly stands at. Right. So amongst all of you all who asked for what is the share, nearly 80% of you all raised less than 10% via retail fundraising. 80% of you all raised less than 10%, right? On the other hand, retail fundraising is a fantastic source for diversification and provides a true way to diversify. So I think that's the nature of the group. Less than 10% are raising from retail fundraising. And let's understand why you're not raising, right? And I think these are really interesting things to look at. So, okay, 50% of you all have said you don't know how to. Then this is a perfect session for you if you don't know how to. 35% of you all are saying that it's, ICH is better returns on investment. Fair point. And I'm going to try and dispel that myth that ICH is different. We perceive it as different because we tend to generally do retail fundraising very similar to the manner in which we do ICH fundraising, but it shouldn't be done that way. A lot of y'all have said y'all do not have bandwidth to think about it. That's about 22%. Hesitant to ask individuals, retail donors will not donate. So I think it's a common thing that nobody will donate to my cause, but it can always be found out, and we can discuss that your special causes during the Q&A if there are certain causes where you can't. 25% of y'all have said you don't know any retail donors, and that's another myth I'm going to dispel, that we don't know any retail donor. That can never be the case. So this is great. I think this sets a good benchmark for us. And I think one of the biggest things that you've come out with is saying that it's not good return on time and investment, and you don't know how, right? So let's move ahead with those points, and the session is going to talk about that. So one of the biggest problems, like I said, why it turns out to be expensive, or why we feel that it's not enough return on investment, is because of the fact that we follow the same kind of we follow the same way in which we do ICH fundraising with retail fundraising. And that should not be the case. And we will try to talk through that using a framework which we call as OPQRS, in the difference between how you would work with ICH donors and how you work with retail donors. So for outreach, ICH donors, your outreach is highly personalized, right? You'll write mails to each person that you want to reach out to, a corporate, an H&I institution, and you will try to personalize it with respect to their choices, their preferences. On the other hand, retail donation communication and outreach is mass communication. You will typically have one communication which you will send to all your donors, right? It is not one-on-one communication, it is mass communication. Proposal, second part. In case of ICH donors, your proposals are very specific to each funder, not only with respect to their format styles, but also with significant detail and with differences with respect to each person's programs, right? So you have a lot of ways in which you will cater one-on-one, write specific proposals for each funder. Retail donors, on the other hand, you will probably have a set of asks. You will probably have saying, educate a child for a year, or provide notebooks, provide uniform, provide stationery. You will have probably a list of 4 or 5 different programs that you are running, and 4 or 5 different asks that you have for which you will be raising money. And that's all that you need to do. You do not need to have a specific proposal for every donor. You will have 4 or 5 programs which you will send out to all retail donors. Next, we come to Q. Q for queries, right? That is what we talk of as customer support. So with ICH donors, it's very high touch because it requires one-to-one interaction, and from typically a senior person as well. Whereas in case of retail donors, it's a very low touch help desk kind of model, right? So it's a model wherein you actually do not have to even know them. The person who's answering typically will answer on email, just like you do it typically in a call center. And I won't be surprised if most inquiries are around ATG, and come the end of the year in July, they're about Form 10B. So more than 80% of your inquiries will be about very, very simple things. I'd like to give an example out here. When I used to head up Give India, we had about 150,000 donors, 150,000 retail donors. Can you tell me, can you guess how many people we had in our customer support team? You can put the answer in chat if you'd like to. Can you guess how many people we had in our customer support team? Okay, somebody said 5, 2. Anyone else? 10, 3. Great answers. Let me tell you, we had a person spending half their time. So effectively, we were half FTE in customer service, where 80% of the queries were, I have forgotten my password, because we had a login system in our thing. And there's a nice forgot password button below it. But 80% of the queries were, I have forgotten my password. So very simple, templatized responses. Today, you can probably do it with AI responses as well, right? So if your technology is good enough where thank you mails are going, where ATGs are going automatically, you would not really need to respond to queries. You would not have anything. Only if your technology is not in place, your query load would increase. But with the right technology in place, you would not need to have too many people doing this work. R for reporting and engagement, I would add, which in case of ICH donors is very specific to each funder. Because for every funder, you'll have to prepare a report. For every funder, you'll have to go meet them. You'll have to give them specific feedback. You'll have to even engage them or their employees very specifically. But in case of retail is more like a product. You can define what the report should be, which can be sent to all donors of a particular program or all your donors. You can decide what the engagement could be. For example, you could have a day where people visit your organization and send it out to every retail donor, and whoever wants to come will land up at your organization, right? So you can decide the terms of reporting and the terms of engagement when it comes to a retail donor. Not so much, and thus that again reduces cost. And last, but the most important is staff. Who do you need to interact with an ICH donor? It is typically founder, CEO, and senior management who have to get involved when you're dealing with an ICH donor. But with a retail donor, it can be somebody who's a much more junior or mid-level person who can deal with retail donors with the right amount of guidance, definitely, and enabled with tools and technology. Like I said, even for query resolution, you need tools. You need to be able to know which donor donated when, have access to all their ATGs, have access to all their Form 10Bs, so that you can send it out at any point in time, right? So huge reduction in cost is based on how you approach it and the realization that retail fundraising is different from ICH fundraising. I think that is the most important. Right? Let me try and talk through some other myths also that surround it. But before that, I'm going to ask you the question and that is going to come in the form of another poll for all of you all. So let me just, this is, yes. I think you can see the poll. Yeah. Why do you want to primarily do retail fundraising? So primarily, why do you want to do retail fundraising? Let's understand that. No questions so far? Good. Why do you want to do retail fundraising? Primary reason why you want to do retail fundraising. Give another 15 seconds for everyone to respond to this one question. Last 5 seconds. Okay, so let me share the results. I'm ending the poll and I'm sharing the results with you. Yeah, so 41% of you all have said to access unrestricted funds. And an equally high number, 35% have said to have a diversified funding source. I think that's absolutely fantastic. If you have figured out the fact that you need a diversified funding source, that's absolutely fantastic. And that's the reason you're doing it. Access unrestricted funds, I think, is a little questionable, but I understand the intent and I'll talk through a little bit on my next slide. Right. So let's look at what are some of the other myths. One of the myths that I have tried to address is the fact that retail fundraising is more expensive than ICH fundraising. Let me try and address some of the other myths that are commonly there. Right. So the first myth is crowdfunding is retail fundraising. If you remember, right in the first part, I had mentioned to you that retail fundraising is the practice and of doing it on a regular basis. Crowdfunding, on the other hand, is typically done one-off as one-off campaigns. Crowdfunding is absolutely fantastic if you are doing peer-to-peer fundraising, which is essentially your volunteers, your donors, your supporters, your contributors, your employees raising money from their social networks is what crowdfunding is great for. But retail fundraising, is about an organization raising money on a day-to-day basis from its own donors. And it's not just that, it's going to be a lot more than that. And we're going to talk about that through this session. A lot of times people don't want to have online payment gateways, which I think are very, very critical if you want to do retail, because they think that checks and bank transfers have a zero cost. Yes, while they have a zero transaction cost, I'm sure many of you all have dealt with situations wherein money has come into your bank account, you don't know who it has come from. And then you'll end up spending time and effort trying to figure out who that money has come from. Checks have bounced. Checks need to be sent to the bank to be deposited, right? All of these are costs which get hidden and we don't realize them. Doing things with technology, doing things with online payments allows you to streamline and automate a lot of systems, including sending thank you notes, sending ATG certificates, and many of those kind of things. The third thing where people worry about how to do retail and I can't do retail or retail is not working is because they take a very simple step of just saying social media. I have basically done social media, right? And I don't think that doing social media is the way that you do retail fundraising. I have never found a single organization that has actually succeeded by simply doing social media, whether in India or abroad, especially organically. Social media works in two situations. If you are willing to spend money, so if you're willing to advertise, then social media will work for you. Again, what does it mean by work? What is the cost of fundraising? Will depend a lot on how well-known your brand is, right? Organizations which are well-known brands like an Akshay Patra, Cry, Helpage will always do better than organizations which don't have an equivalent brand, right? So that's one thing. Social media does not work in a pure organic basis for fundraising. It works if people are raising funds. So if individuals are raising funds in crowdfunding, if individuals are raising funds, it works because individuals have social networks, organizations do not have social networks. Right. This is the one which is really interesting, right? Retail fundraising is unrestricted, is one of the big reasons why everyone wants to raise money. So many of you all have even said this on the call. Firstly, I don't think you mean unrestricted. I think you mean flexible, right? So let's use positive words, not negative words. Second, just imagine if someone were to come up to you as a donor and said, hey, can you give me 1,000 rupees and I will use it for whatever I want? How likely are you going to be willing to give money when you don't know the end purpose? Fundamentally, I'm trying to tell each one and every one of you, put yourself in the donor's shoes and understand that this kind of communication does not appeal to donors. As much as you are giving reports, you are telling a CSR, you're telling institutional donors how their funds are being utilized. Donors also want to ensure their funds are being utilized for the purpose that they have selected, right? If they've selected to give you for general fund or corpus fund, that's fine. But if they've selected to give you for a program, you are much more likely to ensure that you will retain the donor if you channel it to the program. If you ask for money for a program, you're also more likely to get that money for a program. And for this, I'm not saying that don't include your admin costs. Please, for all purposes, include admin cost, include overhead cost, include transaction charges. Put all of that very transparently to the donor. I do not see donors having a problem donating to organization just because they see this, right? And if it's within 10%, it's definitely okay. 15 is also kind of fine. 20 is where it gets a little dicey, but I think up to 10 to 15%, generally there is no problem. So I would strongly suggest to all of y'all that even when you're looking at retail funders or retail donors, please don't think of them as any different from a CSR donor, from an institutional donor. They have the same expectations. They have the same requirements. Just because they can't come and visit you does not mean that we take them for granted. I think that is very, very important. And a lot of y'all said that we don't know how to raise funds, right? So because there's no framework, or let me put it this way, a cheap enough framework that exists for people who want to do retail fundraising.